Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. It's terribly wet around Nairobi at the moment. Our rivers are flooded, and I'll come to that momentarily. In the business, a subtle but crucial informational advantage was called edge. He said that in order to evaluate a technology stock, hedge funds sent people to China to sit in front of a factory and see whether it was doing one shift or two. An edge is the goal of every portfolio manager, and of course this came under dispute, in particular in the case of Steve Cohen of SAC. Home thoughts. This is a photograph from the Magunga, Nairobi, in the rain, and indeed everything has come to a standstill. And it took me back to this picture taken in 1899. It shows the little tent town that grew into the present day Nairobi city. That's from K Researcher. Nairobi is the capital and largest city of Kenya. The name comes from the Maasai phrase Enkare Nairobi, which translates to cool water, a reference to the Nairobi River which flows through the city. The city proper has a population of 3.138 million, and the wider metropolitan area has a population of 6.547 million. It was founded in 1899 by the colonial authorities in British East Africa as a rail depot on the Uganda Railway. The town quickly grew to replace Machakos as the capital of Kenya in 1907. After independence in 1963, Nairobi became the capital of the Republic of Kenya. During Kenya's colonial period, the city became a center for the colony's coffee, tea, and sisal industry. The city lies on the River Athi in the southern part of the country and has an elevation of 1,795 meters. And, this is the point, the area was essentially uninhabited swamp until a supply depot of the Uganda Railway was built in 1899. And this is the main point. Nairobi is built on rivers, and when you get heavy rains, all those rivers flood. And this is a photograph of Nairobi rains. This is by Mako 8200. Remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet. Try to make sense of what you see and wonder about what makes the universe exist. Be curious, and however difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at. It matters that you don't just give up. We are just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet of a very average star, but we can understand the universe, and that makes us something very special. And finally, it surprises me how disinterested we are today about things like physics, space, the universe, and philosophy of our existence, our purpose, our final destination. It's a crazy world out there. Be curious. I like this photograph of a big male lion photographed in the Masai Mara. Political reflections. Theresa May says Russian state culpable for attempted murder of Russian double agent. This gets murkier and murkier. Theresa May has ordered the expulsion of 23 Russian diplomats, escalating tensions between Putin and the West. It's a little bit of a video from TikTok. Take you back to December 2016 when I said we have a deviate tomahawk, and I was talking about Vladimir Putin. The UK has called for an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council to update council members on the investigation into the nerve agent attack in Salisbury. Russian stocks extend slide as UK responds to ex-spy poisoning. Russian equities retreated the most among indices globally as UK Prime Minister Theresa May unveiled measures in response to a chemical weapon attack against a former spy. IMOX Russia index dropped 1.3%. Gazprom's overseas trading and exports divisions employ around 2,000 people, with the bulk of them, around 1,000 in London, and and they're cutting back as well. So look, we have a very fast-moving, fluid situation. I think essentially that President Trump, and it's ironic to say it, has got Putin's back in these matters, and it's going to be very difficult to actually pin the blame on Russia. President Putin unveiled Russia's hypersonic response to the US's so-called missile defense shield and restored the strategic nuclear balance between the two great powers, according to global research. Pepe Escobar, who tends to be sympathetic to the Chinese, writes the myth of a neo-imperial China. The geopolitical focus of the still young 21st century spans the Indian Ocean from the Persian Gulf all the way to the South China Sea, alongside the spectrum from Southwest Asia to Central Asia and China. That happens to configure the prime playing ground over land and maritime of the new Silk Roads, or the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. The epicenter of global power shifting east is ruffling feathers in some US political circles. The Russian pivot to Asia started even before the Maidan in Kiev. I wrote a piece in March, Xi Jinping President for Life, and I was quoting an article in the New Yorker which said each image was identical. The country's supreme leader with the raven black hair and a face fastidiously airbrushed to erase any hint of human blemish, smiling calmly against a sky blue background, an unimpeachable deity in an officially atheist state. I also said Xi Jinping has set out his stall. He is deploying sharp power rather than soft power. And prior to that, in August 2017, I was writing about how, apart from a few half-hearted and timid FONOPS, freedom of navigation operations, China has established control over the South China Sea. China's parabolic rise has been simply breathtaking. Millions of Chinese have been lifted out of poverty, and China continues to expand at a pace that other big economies can only dream about. Xi Jinping's One Belt, One Road program binds the world to Beijing because all the roads and railways have but one destination, that is China. Washington has metasized into an epicenter of risk, Donald Trump refers, and talk of a unipolar US-dominated world have largely evaporated, I say. President Putin refused to be rolled over by a Victoria Nuland-inspired colored revolution in the Ukraine and drew a line in the sand. And one of the collateral consequences of that was to send President Putin into the ready embrace of Xi Jinping. In fact, far from being a unipolar world, we have entered a bipolar or even a tripolar world. That article was called China Rising. I wrote it in August 2017. These will be the world's biggest countries by 2100 by population. Make some interesting reading. On a 3-month annualized basis, core CPI is above 3%, the highest level in a decade. People are extremely relaxed, chillaxed about inflation. It's beginning to rear its head. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 123.61, dollar index 89.75, Japanese yen 106.08, Swiss franc 0.9451, the pound 139.58, the Australian dollar 0.7865, the Indian rupee 64.855, South Korean won 1063.96, and that's up over 1% over the last 4 weeks. Brazilian real 325.99, the Egyptian pound 17.6420, and the South African rand 1181.06. Euro dollar, this chart is from T Commodity. I think 125.60 is going to cap it. We might pop up over 124, but essentially I think on balance you want to be leaning on a short basis as you get above 125. If we do, Merkel seals 4th term in razor-edge parliament vote, ending the longest wait. Under her helm, the DAX has gained an average of 7.6% per annum. Bitcoin slumped to the lowest level in more than a month, last trading at 8,275. It think it dipped below 8,000 earlier. The Bitcoin fad is fading now, says Bloomberg. Suddenly Bitcoin seems a bit boring. It might be hard to believe. But after the 1,400% rally of 2017, with wild swings along the way, the great crypto craze has cooled, at least for now. For the past month, Bitcoin's price has stalled between $8,500 and $11,300, a minuscule range by its standards, and internet searches for Bitcoin have plunged, suggesting public interest has too. The general public is now realizing that this is not a risk-free, get-rich-quick investment opportunity, and general interest has since diminished, said Lucas Nuzzi, the senior analyst in digital asset research. Online searches for Bitcoin fell 82% from December highs, according to Google Trends. Tweets that mention the coin peaked December the 7th at 155,600 and are now down to about 63,000. BitInfo chart says, and the number of Bitcoin transactions is off 60% from its record on December the 13th. As I said on the 2nd of January, when I was sort of forecasting what I was expecting for the year, I said I'm no longer bullish Bitcoin, in fact I'm bearish. Do any of you who constantly claim charting does not work for cryptos want to reconsider your opinion, asks Peter L. Brandt as he posts this chart. Italy risk spread over Germany keeps rising as Matteo Salvini, leader of the anti-migrant league, says government with anti-establishment five-star movement is possible. WTI crude oil, this is from T Commodity again. Where are we trading now? $60, $61. 60 is key. We've dropped through 60. We can move quickly to 55. Gold, last time I looked, 1322.75. Sub-Saharan Africa, I just wanted to show you this image. This is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The Bab el-Mandeb, which means the Gate of Tears, is a strait located between Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula and Djibouti and Eritrea in the Horn of Africa. It connects the Red Sea to this Gulf of Aden. Now, we've learned that the Djibouti government have repossessed the port contract, which was with DP World. Djibouti's government will embrace greater Chinese involvement in the nation's ports and sees no reasons for U.S. concern that its strategic interests may be threatened, said the Finance Minister Ilyas Dawale. The Horn of Africa country is embroiled in a dispute with DP World over the running of the Dorale container terminal and has struck a deal to boost cargo trade with a company working with Chinese state-owned enterprises. It would be ridiculous to imagine that China could restrict or deny U.S. access to Dorale as a result of the deal, Dawale said. Djibouti's development needs all its friends and strategic partners, he said. At the same time, no one can dictate to us who we should deal with. Situated on a global shipping choke point that links the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, Djibouti has become increasingly important to regional and world powers. Smaller than the state of Massachusetts, it hosts the largest U.S. military base in Africa and China's first such overseas facility, which was inaugurated in August, also in the Dorale area. U.S. Africa Command General Thomas Waldhauser warned last week that the Chinese takeover of Dorale could have significant consequences if there were restrictions on the U.S.'s ability to use the facility. Djiboutian officials assured the American ambassador there's no intention to eventually give this over to China. And that takes me back to that article I wrote about China rising in August 2017, and I said recently we saw China formally open a military facility in Djibouti, and I was taking a bunch of moves in tandem and saying when you take them all together it speaks to a material Chinese advance. Friday, CNN reported that there were concerns in Washington. These concerns are growing amid reports that China is poised to gain control of a major commercial port on the Horn of Africa, that being Djibouti. In a separate hearing Wednesday before the House Appropriations Committee, the US Navy Secretary Richard Spencer accused Beijing of weaponizing capital, saying China is making loans, not grants or aid, to finance the infrastructure projects. If the debtor fails to make payments, the asset owner comes and reclaims it and says, "These are now ours," said Spencer. Eritrea has arrested hundreds of perceived opponents as the UN. Most of those arrested were males and some were as young as 13. This is a file photo. An old Fiat car drives along the street in Eritrea's capital Asmara. I've been wanting to go for many years. Salva stalls the peacemakers. Africa Confidential. The government is exploiting Riek Machar's obduracy to push back against pressure from the mediators in Addis Ababa. South Sudan sequestered President Salva Kiir Mayardit made a rare excursion out of Juba the first week of March. Rarer still, the trip was within the country's borders. I want you to tell your sons who are still carrying arms in the bushes of South Sudan to lay them down and come in to join the peace process, he said in Nimule, the strategic town on the border with Uganda, after visiting the grave of his late wife in Loa, an abandoned nearby village where she was buried in 1993 during the Liberation War. South African oil shares down 1.82% yesterday. Naspers was weak. Dollar versus rand was still in this range, 12 to 11.55. I still think we're going to break it and head towards 11. Nigerian oil share up 12.02% this year. Ghana raises Eurobond issuance target to as much as $2.5 billion. The Eurobond markets are proving great liquidity providers for African sovereigns. The West African nation will use $1 billion to help meet its 2018 budget and may issue another $1.5 billion to refinance dollar debt, should it be able to sell the bonds at a cheaper rate, which they will. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is up 24.73% this year. My article over the weekend was the rapprochement between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. I was saying if you look at Kenya Inc.'s history of the last 25 years, it's been the politics that has weighed on our economy. IMF has approved Kenya's request to extend the standby agreement by 6 months. It was approved in March 2016. That was for $989.8 million alongside a standby credit facility of about $500 million. So this is good news. We don't know what the quid pro quo was, but I'm sure it was a substantial reworking of the Rate Cap Act. Moving on, Co-op Bank has reported full year earnings. Earnings per share was down 9.545%. Investment securities held to maturity, i.e. government bonds, which is where all the banks have run into, was up 18.366% at $43.98 billion. Loans and advances to customers net was up just 7.144%. Fees and commissions on loans and advances up 11.534%. Profit before tax was down 7.72% at $16.26 billion. Profit after tax was down 10% at $11.405 billion. Diluted earnings per share was down 9.545%. The dividend payout was maintained at 80 cents a share. I think total operating income was marginally lower than most expectations. Operating expenses, excluding provisions, were higher, and they were talking about one-offs impacting other operating expenses line item, which was driven by fraud payments to customers, and also due to an ERP software that was booked. Bank recorded a 600 million shilling loss in South Sudan attributed to hyperinflation accounting. Dividend is flat. A little behind the street estimates, but it's a very strong tier 1 franchise with a captive account base, and therefore it trades a little differently to the other counters. But I think these results were good enough to justify the current share price. CIC Insurance reported first half full year profit before tax exploded 353% higher Investment properties up 10.497%, government securities up 30.193%, fees and commissions income up eye-popping 57.52%, investment income up 18.585%, profit before tax surged 353% higher, earnings per share was previous full year was 17 cents a share, now 18 cents a share. Dividend was moved higher by 14.286% to 12 cents a share. Earnings growth driven by 20.5% year-on-year growth in net earned premiums. Investment income, as we said, grew 18.6%. Loss ratio stood at 64.9 compared to 64.5. So look, these were dramatically improved year-on-year earnings, but it's quite an expensive share on a price earnings basis in the 30s. Nairobi all shares up 7.23%, closed at a fresh record high. NSE 20 is up 1.32% year to date. From contested history to the present, Kibera, a suburb in Nairobi, Kenya. That photograph is by David Levine for The Guardian. Once again, thank you for stopping by.